I'm Evelyn Harper, 47 years old, and I've been the family joke for 27 years. Every holiday gathering, every birthday party, every single introduction to someone new ended the same way. "This is our dropout, Evelyn," Dad would say with that practiced smile, the one that made strangers uncomfortable but kept him in control. Tonight was supposed to be different. Their 40th anniversary celebration, crystal chandeliers casting warm light over 70 guests, champagne flowing like water. I wore my best dress, hoping maybe this one time they'd see me differently. But when Dad lifted his glass for the toast, his eyes found mine with that familiar glint. "To my successful daughters," he announced, gesturing toward Vanessa with genuine pride. Then he looked at me. "And Evelyn, living proof that college isn't for everyone." The room erupted in polite laughter. My stomach twisted into knots, but I kept my face neutral. I learned that skill long ago. Uncle Raymond sat across from me, the only person who'd ever treated me like I mattered. His phone buzzed against the white tablecloth. He glanced down, then froze completely. His face went pale, eyes widening as he stared at the screen. "Evelyn," he said quietly, but the tremor in his voice cut through the chatter. "Is this yours?" He turned the phone toward me. Everyone stopped talking. Forks paused midair. Glasses hung suspended between table and lips. I saw the headline clearly: "Local developer Evelyn Harper wins historic $18 million restoration project." My heart hammered against my ribs. 27 years of silence, of swallowing insults, of building something in the shadows while they laughed. Now it was all about to come crashing into the light. I met Uncle Raymond's eyes and nodded slowly. "Yes," I said. "That's mine." The silence stretched like taffy, thick and uncomfortable. Dad squinted at the phone from across the table, confusion etched into every line of his face. "There must be another Evelyn Harper," he said firmly, as if declaring it would make it true. "No, Dad," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "It's me." Vanessa's champagne glass slipped slightly in her hand. Uncle Raymond scrolled through the article, his voice growing stronger. "She outbid 3 major firms for the downtown restoration project. The courthouse, the library, the entire historic district." He looked up at me with something like awe. "The biggest contract in the city's history." I watched Vanessa's face drain of color. Her firm had been chasing this project for 6 months. She talked about it endlessly at every family dinner, counting on it to save her struggling company. Somehow quietly, without announcing it to anyone, I'd beaten her. I never told them what happened after I dropped out. How could I? They'd already written my story for me. The quitter, the failure, the cautionary tale. I was 20 years old when I left college to care for Grandma Beatrice during her final year. Pancreatic cancer doesn't wait for semester breaks. Dad called it abandoning my future. Mom cried about wasted potential. Vanessa finished her MBA while I changed bedpans and held Grandma's hand through the worst nights. When Grandma died, she left me $42,000. Not much by some standards, but everything to me. I used it to get my contractor's license, to apprentice with Herman Wallace, the toughest builder in 3 counties. I restored homes nobody wanted, crumbling Victorians, abandoned warehouses, forgotten pieces of history. I worked 16-hour days, learned every trade, earned every callus on my hands. The banks started trusting me. The city started trusting me. My parents never knew. Dad's face shifted from confusion to calculation. I watched him process the numbers, the implications. His investment in Vanessa's firm wasn't exactly secret. Uncle Raymond had mentioned it months ago during a quiet conversation about family finances. Vanessa's company had overextended itself, taken on debt they couldn't service without landing major contracts. This restoration project was supposed to be their salvation. Without it, the financial exposure would be catastrophic. "You couldn't have stepped aside?" Dad asked quietly, but his tone carried weight. Even now, even in my moment of victory, I was supposed to sacrifice. Supposed to make myself smaller so Vanessa could shine. Supposed to remember my place as the dropout, the lesser daughter. I looked at him steadily. "I submitted the best proposal," I said. "The city chose quality over connections." Vanessa stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor, and walked out. Mom followed her immediately. The celebration continued around us, but the joy had evaporated. Dad called me the next morning before sunrise. I was already at the office, reviewing architectural plans for the courthouse renovation. "Evelyn, we need to talk," he said without preamble. "Be smart about this. Partner with Vanessa. Let her take the lead publicly. You can do the work behind the scenes." I held the phone away from my ear for a moment, staring at it in disbelief. 27 years of mockery, of being introduced as the family embarrassment, of watching them celebrate Vanessa's every minor accomplishment while ignoring my existence. Now, when I'd finally achieved something undeniable, he wanted me to hide it. "No," I said simply. "I earned this contract. I'm leading this project." He sighed heavily. "Don't let pride destroy this family." Pride. The word hung between us like accusation. I'd swallowed my pride for nearly 3 decades, smiled through their jokes, accepted their dismissal. Now success was pride. The rumors started within 48 hours. I heard them through contractors, through city officials, through the whispered conversations that stopped when I entered rooms. Evelyn Harper was underbidding irresponsibly. Evelyn Harper was in over her head. Evelyn Harper, the dropout, had somehow fooled the city council. Vanessa never said anything directly. She was too smart for that. But her colleagues asked pointed questions at planning meetings. Her lawyer requested additional documentation proving my firm's capacity. The implication was clear. I'd gotten lucky, or worse, I'd cheated somehow. I responded with facts. Detailed schedules showing my 23 completed restoration projects. Workforce plans demonstrating my network of skilled tradespeople. Financial statements proving my company's stability. Letters of recommendation from Herman Wallace and a dozen other respected contractors. No drama, no accusations, just irrefutable evidence. The city council meeting to review my qualifications was scheduled for Thursday. I prepared like my life depended on it. The council chamber was packed. Vanessa's firm sent 3 representatives, armed with questions and concerns. Local preservation groups attended, worried about the historic building's fate. News cameras lined the back wall. I wore a simple navy suit and carried 3 binders of documentation. When the council president called my name, I walked to the podium calmly. Vanessa's lawyer stood first. "We question Ms. Harper's capacity to manage an $18 million project. Her firm is relatively small, her experience limited to residential work." I opened the first binder. "I've completed 23 restoration projects over 17 years. 14 were commercial properties, including the Riverside Theater and the Merchants Exchange building. Every project finished on time and under budget." I presented photographs, financial records, client testimonials. I showed my apprenticeship certificates, my licenses, my continuing education in historic preservation techniques. I outlined my local hiring plan, my partnership with the State Historical Society, my timeline for completion. When I finished, the chamber erupted in applause. 3 days after the council meeting, my phone rang from an unknown number. The woman on the other end introduced herself as Monica Brennan, former project manager at Vanessa's firm. She'd resigned 2 weeks earlier. "I need to tell you something," Monica said carefully. "Your sister's company has been in trouble for months. They overextended on 3 projects simultaneously, borrowed against anticipated revenue from contracts they didn't have yet. The restoration project wasn't going to save them. Losing it just exposed problems that already existed." I listened stunned. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because they're spreading lies about you to cover their own failures. You deserve to know the truth." After we hung up, I sat in my truck outside the construction site, processing everything. They hadn't mocked me because I failed. They'd mocked me because they needed me to fail. Needed me to stay small, to validate their choices, to prove that dropping out really was the disaster they'd always claimed. Mom called to invite me to Sunday dinner. "Just family," she said. "No celebration, no speeches. We need to talk." I almost declined, but Uncle Raymond texted separately, "Please come." For me, the house felt different when I arrived. Smaller somehow, or maybe I'd just grown larger. Vanessa sat at the table, her usual confidence dimmed. Dad looked older than I remembered. Mom fidgeted with her napkin. Uncle Raymond raised his glass when everyone had gathered. To Evelyn, he said clearly. For doing the work nobody saw. For building something real while we weren't paying attention. No sarcasm, no jokes, no qualifications. Just recognition. Dad stared at his plate, jaw working like he wanted to speak but couldn't find words. Vanessa met my eyes briefly, then looked away. Mom reached across the table and squeezed my hand. It wasn't an apology, but it was something. We ate in uncomfortable silence, the weight of 27 years pressing down on all of us. After dinner, Vanessa cornered me in the kitchen while I rinsed dishes. You always acted like you were above it all, she said, her voice sharp with resentment. I turned off the water, dried my hands carefully. Above what exactly? The competition. The family dynamics. Like you didn't care what anyone thought. I studied her face, seeing exhaustion beneath the anger. There was never competition, Vanessa. You were building your career. I was just trying to survive. Those aren't the same thing. You could have told us what you were doing. Would you have listened? Would Dad have stopped calling me the dropout? Would Mom have stopped looking disappointed every time someone asked about me? She had no answer for that. We stood in silence while the dishwasher hummed between us. Finally, she spoke again, quieter. My firm is struggling. I might lose everything. I know, I said gently. I'm sorry. Her eyes widened slightly. She'd expected gloating, not sympathy. A month into construction, Dad appeared at the courthouse site. He wore khaki pants and a button-down shirt, looking completely out of place among the work crews and scaffolding. I was reviewing foundation repairs with my structural engineer when I spotted him. Can I talk to you? He asked. I nodded to the engineer, and we stepped aside. Dad stared up at the building, at the intricate stonework we were carefully preserving, at the crews working with precision and care. I didn't know, he said finally. Didn't know what? That you were doing this. Building all this. I thought you just gave up after Grandma died. I kept my voice level. You never asked, Dad. You decided what my story was, and nothing I said could change it. I thought dropping out meant quitting. I did quit college. I didn't quit life. I didn't quit learning or growing or working. I just did it differently than you expected. He was quiet for a long moment, watching a worker carefully restore a decorative cornice. Can I see the plans? He asked. 6 months later, the courthouse renovation was complete. The grand reopening drew 300 people, city officials, historians, preservation groups, curious residents. The building gleamed like it had a century ago, every detail restored with painstaking accuracy. Inside the main entrance, they'd mounted a bronze plaque, Historic Restoration led by Evelyn Harper, Harper Restoration Company. No footnotes, no qualifications, no mentions of family connections. Just my name and my work. Dad stood in front of that plaque for 10 minutes, reading it over and over. Mom cried when she saw the restored courtroom, its original woodwork brought back to life. Vanessa attended but left early, her discomfort visible. Uncle Raymond found me during the reception. Your grandmother would be so proud, he whispered. I thought about Grandma Beatrice, about those final months caring for her, about the inheritance that started everything. I hope so, I replied. I did this for her as much as for me. Thanksgiving arrived with its usual chaos of family gathering. But when relatives asked Dad about his daughters, something shifted. This is Evelyn, he said, introducing me to his college roommate and his wife. She's the contractor who restored the historic courthouse downtown. Led an $18 million project. No smirk, no joke, no mention of dropping out. Just facts, delivered with something that almost sounded like pride. The couple's eyes widened with genuine interest. We saw the news coverage, the wife said. That restoration was remarkable. You saved an important piece of the city's history. The conversation continued, but I barely heard it. I kept replaying Dad's introduction in my head, waiting for the punchline that never came. At dinner, when someone asked about my background, Dad started to speak, then stopped. He looked at me, really looked at me, maybe for the first time in years. Why don't you tell them yourself, Evelyn? So I did. I told them about dropping out to care for Grandma, about learning the trade, about building my company one project at a time. Vanessa's firm survived, but barely. She downsized from 20 employees to 6, moved to a smaller office, took on modest residential projects instead of chasing major contracts. We ran into each other at a supplier's warehouse in December. "I'm bidding on the Morrison Street renovation," she said awkwardly. "Small commercial property, historic designation." "I saw the listing," I replied. "It's a good building. Are you bidding?" I shook my head. "Too small for my current capacity. But I could recommend you to the property owner if you'd like." She looked startled. "Why would you do that?" "Because you do good work, Vanessa. You always have. You just overextended trying to prove something. And you didn't need to prove anything?" "I did. But I proved it to myself, not to Dad or anyone else. That's the difference." A week later, she texted me, "Got the Morrison Street project. Thank you." We started collaborating occasionally after that, strictly professional on equal terms. The sister dynamic faded into something healthier. Uncle Raymond invited me to lunch at his favorite diner. Over coffee and sandwiches, he leaned back and smiled. "You know why they mocked you all those years?" he asked. I shrugged. "Because I dropped out. Because I didn't follow the expected path." "No," he said firmly. "Because you scared them. You made choices they couldn't control, couldn't predict, couldn't fit into their narrative about success. That kind of independence is threatening." I thought about that, turning it over in my mind. "So they made me small. They tried. But you never actually became small, Evelyn. You just worked quietly until your work got too loud to ignore." He pulled out his phone, showing me the news alert from the anniversary dinner. "This arrived at the exact moment your father was calling you a dropout. Perfect timing. You think the universe has a sense of humor? I think you earned what you got, and the recognition arrived exactly when it needed to." We finished lunch talking about his grandchildren, about nothing important, just enjoying each other's company. The local news ran a feature story about the courthouse restoration in January. They interviewed me on site, filmed the architectural details, spoke with city officials about the project's impact. The segment aired during prime time on a slow news day, reaching thousands of viewers. My phone exploded with messages. Former classmates I hadn't heard from in decades reached out to congratulate me. Local business owners asked about restoration consultations. The mayor's office invited me to join the Historic Preservation Committee. Neighbors stopped me at the grocery store to thank me for saving the courthouse. Dad watched the news segment 3 times. Mom called afterward, her voice thick with emotion. "I'm so sorry we didn't see this sooner," she said. "Didn't see you." It wasn't quite the apology I'd imagined over the years, but it was honest. "I needed to find my own way," I told her gently. "Maybe you couldn't have seen it until I finished building it." "Still," she whispered, "we should have tried." A letter arrived in February, forwarded from my office. The return address was a retirement home 3 hours away. Inside, I found careful handwriting on cream stationery. "Dear Evelyn, you don't know me, but I was Beatrice Harper's closest friend for 40 years. I heard about your courthouse restoration and wanted to reach out. Beatrice talked about you constantly during her final months. She was so proud that you left school to care for her, though she worried about the cost to your future. She made me promise to tell you something if I ever got the chance. Evelyn has the gift of seeing what's broken and making it beautiful again. Not just buildings, people, situations, everything she touches. You proved her right. She would be overjoyed to see what you've built. With admiration, Dorothy Kellerman." I read the letter to Dad and Vanessa at Sunday dinner. Mom cried. Dad cleared his throat several times, unable to speak. Vanessa squeezed my hand across the table. The city council meeting in March brought an unexpected moment. They were reviewing bids for another historic property, the old Carnegie Library on 5th Street. Herman Wallace stood during public comment, requested permission to speak about my qualifications. He was 83 now, stooped with arthritis, but his voice carried authority. "I've been building in this city for 60 years, Herman said. "I've worked with hundreds of contractors, trained dozens of apprentices. I've never seen anyone work like Evelyn Harper. She doesn't just restore buildings, she understands them, knows what they were, what they can be again. When she was my apprentice, She'd spend hours researching original construction techniques, tracking down period-appropriate materials, learning crafts most contractors have forgotten. The courthouse project isn't luck. It's the result of 17 years of dedication nobody bothered to notice. Dad attended that meeting. He sat in the back row, listening to Herman's testimony with tears running down his face. Afterward, outside the chambers, he couldn't meet my eyes. "I never knew," he kept saying. "I never knew." The city awarded me the Carnegie Library restoration in April. Another major contract, another historic building rescued from neglect. Vanessa's firm didn't even bid this time. She sent me a congratulatory text instead. "You've earned this. Do great work." The official announcement made the front page of the local paper. Dad bought 5 copies, showed them to everyone he encountered. His pride was almost embarrassing in its intensity, like he was trying to make up for 27 years of dismissal all at once. I appreciated the effort but didn't need it anymore. I'd built my self-worth in the quiet years, brick by brick, project by project. His approval was nice but not necessary. Mom asked if she could visit the library site once work began. "I'd like to understand what you do," she said carefully. "I'd like that," I replied honestly. We were building something new, my parents and I, not quite forgiveness, not quite reconciliation, but maybe acceptance. Maybe recognition that people can surprise you if you let them. Dad pulled me aside after Sunday dinner in May. "Vanessa asked if you'd consider partnering on the Wilson Building project," he said. "It's a joint bid with Historical Society funding. She needs someone with your expertise." I'd seen the Wilson Building proposal. Complicated work, significant historical value, too large for Vanessa's current capacity alone. "What do you think I should do?" I asked. He looked surprised by the question. "I think you should decide based on the work, not on family politics." "Can you do it well together?" "Probably. If we establish clear roles and expectations. Then consider it on those terms. Don't sacrifice your standards for family harmony, but don't refuse just to prove independence either." It was perhaps the wisest thing he'd ever said to me. I met with Vanessa the following week. We drafted a partnership agreement that was fair, transparent, and professional. She would handle client relations and historical research. I would manage construction and preservation techniques. Equal partnership, equal respect. We submitted the bid together, and waiting for the decision felt different this time. Not competitive, just collaborative. Dad visited my office in June, unannounced. I was reviewing blueprints for the library restoration when he knocked. "Can I come in?" he asked. "Of course." He settled into the chair across from my desk, looking around at the framed photos of completed projects, the architectural drawings covering the walls, the shelf of preservation awards. "I've been thinking," he began slowly, "about what Herman said at that council meeting. About 17 years of work nobody noticed." I waited, letting him find his words. "I underestimated you, Evelyn. Not just about this, about everything. I thought dropping out meant failure, and I couldn't see past that assumption to who you actually were." "I know," I said quietly. "And I'm sorry. Not just sorry I was wrong, but sorry I made you feel small. Sorry I introduced you as the dropout when I should have just said you were my daughter and let your work speak for itself." It wasn't quite the apology I'd imagined, but it was honest and painful and real. "Thank you," I replied. "That means something. Can you forgive me?" "I think so. Eventually. We're working on it." He nodded, accepting that qualified answer. "That's fair." Mom started visiting the library site every Friday. She'd bring coffee, wear sensible shoes, ask questions about the restoration process. Sometimes she just watched the crews work, marveling at the precision and care. One afternoon, while we took a break from reviewing tile samples, she touched my arm gently. "Can I tell you about something I've been thinking about?" she asked. "Sure." I spent so much time worried about conventional success. Degrees, titles, the path everyone expects. When you dropped out, I felt embarrassed. Not because you'd actually failed, but because I couldn't explain your choice to my friends in a way that made sense to them. "I know, Mom. I understood that even then. But here's what I didn't understand. You were building something more meaningful than any degree could give you. You were creating value, preserving history, learning trades that matter. And I missed it because I was too busy being disappointed about the conventional path you didn't take. She gestured at the library around us, at the carefully restored architecture. This is extraordinary, Evelyn. You're extraordinary. I'm sorry it took me so long to see it. Uncle Raymond called me the week before the library dedication. Remember that anniversary dinner when my phone buzzed? He asked. Of course. That was the beginning of everything changing. I need to confess something. That news alert wasn't coincidence. I frowned, confused. What do you mean? The mayor called me that afternoon. Told me you'd won the courthouse bid, asked me to make sure your parents were at dinner that night. He knew you'd never announced it to the family, figured you needed someone to break the news for you. I sat down slowly, processing this revelation. You knew before dinner even started? I knew. And I waited for exactly the right moment, right when your father was calling you a dropout in front of 70 people. The timing wasn't luck, Evelyn. It was justice. I started laughing, couldn't help it. That's actually perfect. I thought so too. Sometimes the universe needs a little help with poetic timing. Thank you, Uncle Raymond. For everything. You did the work, sweetheart. I just made sure people were watching when the recognition arrived. The Carnegie Library opened in September to enormous community celebration. 500 people attended, including the governor. The restored reading room glowed with original light fixtures, refinished woodwork, carefully preserved architectural details. My name was etched on another bronze plaque, permanent recognition of the work. Dad gave a short speech about the importance of historic preservation, then surprised everyone by calling me to the podium. My daughter Evelyn led this restoration, he said clearly. She's dedicated her career to saving our city's architectural heritage. We're fortunate to have her talent and commitment. No mention of dropping out, no qualifications or jokes. Just truth, delivered with genuine pride. Vanessa stood in the front row, applauding along with everyone else. Our Wilson Building partnership had been approved. We were building something new together. Mom held Uncle Raymond's arm, both of them beaming. I thought about Grandma Beatrice, about that inheritance that started everything, about 27 years of quiet work finally becoming visible. I didn't destroy anyone to get here. Didn't tear down Vanessa or punish my parents or seek revenge. I just stopped making myself small. Built something too substantial to ignore. And somehow that was enough. The recognition felt good, but the real victory was simpler. I knew my worth before anyone else did. That knowledge sustained me through every joke, every dismissal, every introduction as the dropout. They finally saw me, but I'd seen myself all along. And in the end, that made all the difference.